So hey there fellow YouTubers, it's Frank Bush here again. So in some previous videos I've shown out my modular ropecraft system where I did a detailed breakdown of how to make these units out of tarred bankline. So here I have the tarred bankline version that I've shown out in detail in previous videos. But I know that in the bushcraft community, Paracord is kind of the standard that gets used amongst the majority of people. So, and there's some measurement changes and that kind of stuff you need to do in order to make the Paracord version of these. So I'm going to go through that in detail in this video. And this is a Paracord, kind of a bunch of the modular ropecraft system units that I have here. But I've got some orange cordage here where I'm going to show some variants of doing this kind of setup, and then how to use this together with a combination of Paracord and the tarred bankline so that you can achieve a really flexible and really versatile piece of kit that you can add into your backpack that allows you to quickly set up camps and when you're out in the fields without having to tie any knots and that kind of stuff. So if you're interested in kind of advancing out your ropecraft abilities, then stay tuned, yeah? So I'll give a quick primer to kind of the basic construct of these if you've never seen any of my modular ropecraft system videos before. And I'll just show you kind of a quick example of what we're talking here. So I've got these individual modular units, and what they have is there's a loop on the end where there's 4 knots that are along the line with where the line has been doubled up. So there's like little loops that exist in between. So then there's a 1 foot length of cordage that just has nothing on it. That's part of this unit. And then it's the exact same thing on the other side where you get the 4 knots and then the loop and that kind of stuff, yeah? So what I'll do now, like I say, if you're interested in kind of the bankline version of this, I do have detailed videos up on the channel of making these, assembling a set of them, and then I go into using them out in the field to show how handy they can really be. And we'll do a similar kind of thing in this video with the Paracord, but like I say, we'll show some variants of more flexibility we can add into using these units. So this is a single one that's already done off in the Paracord here, where like I say, it's the loop, we get the 4 knots, the 1 foot length here, and then the 4 knots and back to the loop. Right? So fairly straightforward. Like I say, I'll do off an individual one of these to show you the exact specs of this, and then I'll show you some variants that we do when it comes to using this orange cordage. I just thought it'll stand out on the camera better when I go to show, you know, different variants. So one way or the other, we'll go off and do a single unit of this just to show you the example. Then I'll show you the variants with the orange. We'll do a set of them, and then we'll take them out into the field and we'll show you an example of using these. Okay, so I just got a spool of Paracord here. If you watch previous videos of mine, you'll know that I feed off this spool to do all sorts of projects. But the thinking really is, it's really elementary. I just want to take a 7 foot length of this and cut it off, yeah? So I won't bother doing that all on camera. I'll just go and cut it, like I say, to a 7 foot length, and then we'll move on to the next step. Okay, so after you've measured it to your 7 foot lengths, don't forget to turn around and burn your ends. And what this does is just stop any fraying and that kind of stuff in the cordage, yeah? So pretty elementary. Just gonna kind of cook the ends and make sure that they melt. I'll hold them for a second, let them cool down so I don't, you know, cause anything. But all it is just a 7 foot length cut and cauterized at the end, if you will. And like I say, don't forget to do that part because you'll get fraying later on if you don't. So, and then I'll cut seams and we'll move on to the next step. Okay, so now for the next step, I'm just going to take the one end of the cordage that we cut and measure it out. And I want to measure that out to the 18-inch mark. And right at that point, that's where I'm going to do a fold on the line. I'm going to bring it back on itself. And then right as close as I can get it to where this line is folded back, I'm just going to take it and put a little overhand loop in here. Do a little overhand knot. And just feeding that through the hole. And, you know, really simple elementary knot. There's nothing to it. And I want to make sure that that's good and firm, so it's not going anywhere. Now, like I say, it should look like that at this point in time. And now I'm just going to turn around and I just do this all by ballpark, but I'm going to take 2 fingers, kind of measure up where I'm going to put another knot, a little overhand loop again. Do the same where I'm going to feed that through, just apply tension, And it should be now 1.5 inches, 2 inches away from each other. Do it again, 2 fingers. Set my loop. Just feed the end through. Make sure they're pretty well evenly spaced between the knots. One more time. Take the loop, feed it through. Make sure that's all pretty well even, which it is within reason. Just pull, give it a bit of tension. That's the one side done now. Now I'm going to turn around and do the exact same thing on the other side, where, like I say, you just measure it out for that 18 inches. Fold it right at that point. Bring it back and do your series of overhand loops exactly the same as we just showed previously, yeah? So I'll just get this one in here. I'll go do the rest of the overhand knots, the 3 more that I'm going to need here, up that line, but because, you know, I'm just showing an overhand knot, there's nothing to it. I'll go and set that up, and that's pretty well all it takes to do an individual component. So I'll stop, I'll shift camera angles, and then I'll talk about the lengths and the reasoning behind it, yeah? And then we'll go off and start to do some in the orange, because I've already got a bunch of these done off in my dark green. I've already got a bunch of these that I just use when I'm out in the field anyways. So I just wanted to show you this one in the example. But I'll go off and show a variance of this with the orange next. And like I say, I'll just kind of make some talking points about these individual units and why we measured it, the distance we did and all that. Okay, so now I've got one of the bankline versions that I did in previous videos in detail. And then now the new Paracord one we just walked through making, yeah? So there is some subtle variance that exists when it comes to these for lengths and that kind of stuff, yeah? So these, when straightened out for the charred bankline ones, they're about 28 inches. And they only take 5 foot of cordage to do, whereas these Paracord ones, they're about 33.5 inches when you straighten them out, you know, full length. And for those, they take 7. So it's a little bit more cordage intensive. And I'll kind of walk through a bit of the variance with these and why. So with the charred bankline, it has quite a thinner diameter. So when I'm folding over this point to tie these knots like we just showed earlier in the video, because of this thinner diameter, I only have to fold over the line for 12 inches instead of the 18 that I do with the Paracord. Because the Paracord has that larger diameter to the cordage, it makes it that it consumes a bit more of the line, if you will, when you're doing these knots. It's really the diameter of the cordage that you're using is in direct relationship to, you know, do you need to use 18 inches or 12 inches? Or, you know, if you're going with a larger cordage, you're going to have to go even higher. So the larger the diameter of the cordage, the longer the fold point, if you will, to do your set of knots to begin with, becomes a critical aspect of things. So like I say, I just wanted to show that kind of fine detail. So if you're really wanting to have a really, really small, compact, lightweight, and have as many of these units as possible, then you're better off to go with the charred bankline. But if you want to have kind of larger, more, you know, longer length, more durable when it comes to being able to carry more weight, then Paracord's a better option. And if you want to go kind of more of a pro version, I'll just grab my Kevlar ones that I have here and show you these. And I've done full previous videos on this. That's what this jumbled mess is, really. It's a variance of this design that I use, but instead of doing just the loops on both ends, there's some subtle variance with how I make those. But the Kevlar is kind of more the pro version, if you will, and it handles like 1,800 pound strength with the same diameter of Paracord, which would only handle like 550 pounds. And it's more heat resistant and everything else. But in this video, like I said, I really wanted to appeal to the more common man bushcraft guy that is primarily going to be using Paracord, which is the vast majority of people, or potentially the charred bankline, which I, like I said, did a full separate video on in the past in that regard. So depending on which cordage you prefer, you might want to go off and watch the charred bankline if that's the one you prefer. But either way, like I say, these paracord ones now end up using a fair bit for almost, a couple of inches difference in the overall length from the 28 to the 33.5. I'm using a full, 2 feet more of cordage in length when it comes to the paracord ones. So it is more cordage of intensive the larger the diameter becomes, yeah? And the reason why I did the 7 feet was because each end in the paracord with the 18 inches folded on itself takes up 3 foot of the cord. So that's 3 foot, 6 foot, and then I wanted to have a 1 foot length here. And that gives me the 7 foot that we originally cut, yeah? But this is a really flexible design and construct where you can stick with the same kind of loop with the 4 knots and adjust the length that you have here. So if you're wanting to, not carry as many of these small individual components and have ones that are more kind of standard 5 to 6 foot length guy lines and that kind of stuff, that's what we're going to show now in the next part of the video using this orange cordage, where instead of doing the 7 foot of cordage to do these little kind of, 1 foot length of just a blank, I'm just going to simply step it up and I'm going to go with 10 foot of cordage now, and that way there's 4 foot lengths that are there, and there's reason for that I'll show later on as we kind of move into the video. So I'll go off and cut off a couple 10 foot lengths of this now, and the orange stuff I'm going to go cut 6 10 foot lengths, so the 60 foot of rope's going to get used up in this next part of the example, yeah? Okay, and as you can see, I've gone and cut off 6 different 10 foot lengths of cordage. I just cut the first and measured it, and then I measured all the rest to the first one. So whatever the lengths are, this entire construct is really flexible. Whatever the lengths are you want to do are adjustable to your leisure, if you will. So one of the key things to remember is the bare minimum is going to be 7 foot, because that gives you, you could go 6.5 and stuff, but, just to kind of round it to the foot, because it takes 3 foot of cordage for each side of the paracord to do the loop and the knots. And that's a critical component to the modular ropecraft system. So, if I step this out to 11 foot, the space between one set of loops and knots and the next would be 5 foot. At 10 foot, it'll create a 4 foot space. If I went 11, it'd be 5 foot. 12 would be 6 foot, that kind of thing, right? But generally speaking, I find the length I'm about to show you in the example is kind of ideal when it comes to wanting to take some of these, tarred bankline modular ropecraft systems. If you already have those sitting in your kit, like it's shown in previous videos, you can interchange and mix these up, and you can get pretty well 99% of the functionality you would out of the Kevlar ones, the more advanced ones that I've shown in previous videos. You can get the vast majority of the functionality with a combination of the paracord and the tarred bankline ones. But I'll kind of clear off the table, if you will, and we'll go back down to just one, and we'll go through setting up one of these, and then off camera I'll go do the rest as just a set, because they only take a couple minutes each, as shown earlier in the video, right? But yeah, we'll do a detailed breakdown of doing one, and then I'll just do the rest, yeah? So I'll just kind of, like I say, walk through one in detail. And the reason why primarily I don't like the quality of this paracord compared to the dark one I have, but I know a lot of people watching my videos have had a hard time seeing the dark colors and the knots I'm doing and that kind of stuff. So I just use the orange to do a better example visually, and put the white drop in the back and stuff to try to make it as good on the camera as I can. But we're going to do the exact same thing we did earlier, where just from one end of the cordage, I'm going to measure it out now to that 18-inch mark. And I'm going to do my fold right at that point, bring it back, and exactly as we did earlier, where when I'm back to the point where it's, the fold meets the end, if you will, I'm just going to take that as close as I can and simply just create a little loop in the line, and then I'm just going to feed the rest of that through it and just pull it. And I want that to be as close to that bottom as I can. So I kind of roll it down and stuff. I mean, you can be finicky and get it all the way to the very, very end, but it's okay to have a bit of a tag. It's not critical. It's more just you want to have enough space that every 2 inches or so as you go up now, you're able to just roll it again, feed that loop through, create the overhand knot, and about 1.5 inches, 2 inches or so. You know, it's really flexible in that regard, and we'll do the same again. Now, exactly as I did earlier in the video, hopefully the camera's picking it up with the orange a little better if you had a hard time seeing. And I just want to make sure they're evenly spaced as I'm going. And then the same again. You know, and if you feel like one of the knots is off a bit or whatever, because they're just little overhand knots, it's really easy to just adjust those and that kind of stuff. But that within reason is good to me. Normally I'll just take my loop end in one hand, and then I just kind of hold on to the end here and just pull on both ends just to tighten those knots. And it's as simple as that. The one side's done. I'll do the exact same thing on the other side. I measure out that 18 inches. That's my fold point. And just like earlier in the video, I'll go and set the first one just so I don't lose the spacing of it. And then I'll just do the rest off camera. And the thinking really is exactly as I've done on this first 10-foot length of cordage is exactly what I'm going to do for the entire other 5 that I've done. The measurements, everything will be exactly the same, and it's just a repeatable, and that's the modular sense of this Ropecraft system, is that it's all just kind of small, repeatable, simple. You know, you could have kids doing this around a campfire. You know, if you're out camping with the family and stuff and you want to do a project for the family, you know, you can have the kids kind of kept busy doing this kind of stuff, all with pretty elementary stuff. But you can see it's really rapid now to put that together, yeah? So I've got my both ends where I've got that loop, I've got the 4 knots. And like I say, when it comes to the spacing now between these two, because we had the 10-foot length, this should be roughly a 4-foot. There's 1, 2, 3, and 4. And you can see right on the foot mark, yeah? So I'm doing off 6 in this example. You can scale this up. You can do 8, 10. You know, you can do it down to like having 4 or 2 or whatever. That's the good part about this system. Depending on, you know, how advanced and how much rope you want to carry and how advanced you want your camps to be using these constructs, you can scale all of this stuff up and just use, you know, more and more components will allow you to do more and more things around camp. So like I say, in the example we're doing today, I'll go off and I've got the other 5 of these 10-foot lengths. I'll go off and do exactly the same with the other 5 as I've done here, and then we can have complete sets, and then I'll show you kind of putting it together and combining it all to get it ready to use out in the field, yeah? And I guess I should mention this as well, just so people know the exact distances, the kind of stuff we're creating. Even though we used a 10-foot piece of cordage, the finished modular component only comes out to 69 inches. If I stretch this and make it really taut, it'll reach about 70 inches or so. So, you know, you're talking 2, 4, 6, 8, 9. So 5'9". So, you know, you're losing close to about 1/3 to nearly half of the cordage length that you started with. To give you an idea of this stuff is more cordage, you know, consumptive, if you will. You know, it consumes a fair bit more cordage in that regard, but the functionality you get at the end, to me, is well worth it, yeah? But I know that there's people want to know the exact lengths and everything else so that they can work their own calculations. That's what it comes down to. You're looking about 5'9", 5'10" for each strip, yeah? All right, so it's been about, 10, 15 minutes or so, and I managed to get the 6 done off now, where, like I say, they all now on both ends have the loop where it's got the 4 knots with the little spaces in between the knots, right? And so the sets are all completed in that regard for these ones. Now, when it comes to these 1-foot length, you know, where the line is just 1 foot, if you will, when it comes to those, I already had them made off, so I didn't have to, you know, I've got my bundle sitting here, so I didn't have to turn around and go off and make those all off camera. But you're talking about you're going to want 2 of these for each one of these. So, you know, you're going to need a dozen of these individual units, if you will. And to give you an idea, like I say, this whole thing, to do off a dozen of these and 6 of these, you're looking at maybe about an hour and a half if you're really kind of taking your time, right? To give you a ballpark for, you know, how long does it take to kind of whip these together. So what I'm going to do is just separate off 12 out of the bundle I have sitting already pre-made. I'm going to go separate 12 of these individual 1 foot length ones off, and then I'll show you how I can combine these together and kind of get ready to use them as a complete unit, yeah? Okay, so I just straightened out the pile I had and separated them all so they're individual modular components instead of all linked together. Then you can see I've got 12 of these with the shorter 1 foot lengths in between the loops and the knots, and then I've got 6 of these with the 4 foot lengths in between the loops and the knots. So to give you an idea of the volume of cordage that it takes to do this, you know, for these, you know, dozen that I have sitting here of the dark colored ones, you know, at 7 foot each to do a dozen of them off, that's 84 foot of cordage, yeah? And for these 6, they were 10 foot apiece. So, you know, you're talking 60 feet there, you know, for the amount of cordage. So altogether, you're talking 144 feet of cordage up to this point in time, yeah? So to give you an idea, the bearing of that, typically when I go off into the field, I'm carrying generally, you know, separate from this kind of specific modular ropecraft system, I'm carrying an 150, 200 foot of cordage is pretty bulk standard. But one way or the other, we'll walk through now combining all this together to give me individual components. And like I say, this is a really flexible construct. I don't necessarily need to do this next step. I can use these independently, these orange units, and I'll show that all as part of the example when we're out in the field, yeah? I don't need to have any of these units. If I wanted to have a really small, lightweight, simple setup, I could stick with just these 6 and use them as guy lines that can become ridge lines and that kind of stuff. Or, like I say, I'm going to step it up and show the full robust example. And later on in the video, I'm even going to bring in some of these tarred bank lines and show you kind of the most advanced kind of bushcraft version of this using a combination of the Paracord with the tarred bank line. Then that to me is really the more ideal setup. So one way or the other, I'll turn around and pull off a dozen of these that I have sitting as well. And like I say, it all takes about the same amount of time to make. So, you know, if you want to build this out to be the full robust project, then you have enough cordage to kind of do all these things. And, you know, to calculate it out, these at 5 foot, a dozen of them is what, 60 foot or something? Hold on. I'll just look and see now. So to do off a dozen of the bankline ones, you're talking an additional 60 foot of bankline that you would need for this project. So all in all, like I say, it is kind of more rope intensive when it comes to the amount of cordage that you're going to be consuming in this project, but you'll see the functionality is just unsurpassed. If you've watched a lot of previous videos of mine, with the Kevlar setup, I'm able to do kind of adjustable prusiks that slide down the line and stuff. With this kind of construct, it enables me to be able to do that, yeah? But like I say, without getting too ahead of myself when it comes to the real world examples, we'll just start to assemble these components as the next step, yeah? Okay, so for the combination of these, I'm just going to pull off 2 of them that I'll need to begin with. And it's going to be really, really elementary. I'm just going to take one of these 10-foot units now. And like I say, we've got the loops on both ends, yeah? So I'm just going to, you know, I've got the one loop on the one end and the one loop on the other with their set of knots, yeah? So all I'm going to do now is take one of these, you know, smaller units, and I'm going to just feed its loop through. I'm going to take the other end of itself and just feed it back through. And it'll cinch onto that orange line now. And straighten it out as such. And the reason why we do these connects is it allows it where we can easily pop this stuff off, detach it, use it for different purposes when we're out in the field. And I'll do the exact same on the other end now. So that's the one end there. Now I'll just turn around and take the other end. And exactly the same thing. I'm just going to slide that loop through. I'm going to take the other end of its unit and just feed it through itself, just to kind of hitch on to that orange paracord, yeah? As such. And you just want to make sure that it's kind of sitting straight as such. And you can see, that's locked on now. That's not going anywhere. And what that does is it becomes another knot in the line. If I pull this way, it'll lock and set. And if I pull, you know, the other way, it'll lock and set. It has nowhere to go. So it acts as though it's another knot in the line, just like we have these knots, yeah? And the way you kind of easily, right now I'm using 2 different color cordage, so it's really easy to see the difference. But if you're using the same cordage when you're out in the field, generally speaking, when you see sets of your knots along your line, you've got 1, 2, 3, 4. At the 5th one is where that break point is. And then I've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So it doesn't matter what direction I'm looking at it from, whether I'm coming in this way or coming in this way. The 5th one is always the spot where I can break apart these modular ropecraft units. And they're really, really elementary when it comes to splitting them back apart again, because there is no knot or anything. All I do is grab on here and pull. And they just loosen back off. And if I want to reclaim the smaller unit and get it off so it's independent, it's as simple as that. And it's back off again, right? So, like I say, I'll just whip it back on there because I do want to kind of show out the example. And we're going to do this to all 6 of the sets of the orange that we had here. Like I say, just kind of make sure it's sitting flatter. And it's really elementary. And now all it really is just we've got one of the little shorter runs connected on to the longer runs. And I'm going to turn around now and do that to all 6, yeah? So I won't bother showing all that on camera because it just gets tedious. But I'll go off and do that, and then I'll cut back once we have them fully assembled, yes? Okay, so I've turned around and hooked together the dark green ones to the orange ones. And like I said, I just kind of rolled up the 5 of them in the, little coils, but I thought I'd just leave this one out to show one more time just to make sure everything's crystal clear and how this is flowing, right? And so, as you can see, you've got the one dark green one, and then it just does that quick connect here, feeds through to the orange comes out, connects to another dark green one on the other side. Easy peasy lemon squeezy, there's not much to it, right? So what I'll probably do is just take it up to the next level here and just turn around and attach tarred bankline ones on. And like I say, if you haven't seen the previous tarred bankline version, the only difference that exists within this construct is when I measured 18 inches for the paracord, you only have to measure 12 inches with the tarred bankline when it comes to where you're going to fold it in half and then start doing your knots up the line, because it's that smaller diameter cordage. It just makes it that you don't have to use as much cordage. So I'm going to go pull off a dozen of those from my stack because, like I say, I've got the stack that I've shown in previous videos, and I'll turn around and pull off the dozen I need, because what we're going to do now is, say, for the tarred bankline, we're going to use 2 of those for each orange one. Where we got the 6, it'll be a dozen, yeah? So I'll go and just kind of pull that off, and then we'll get ready to do the complete setup as the next step, yeah? Okay, so it's been 3 or 4 minutes now. I just went and grabbed my bankline, the modular components there, and pulled it all off. Just as I daisy chained the small dark green paracord ones to the orange ones, I had the same setup happening with the tarred bankline, where I had all of these connected to form a longer line for rigid line use and that kind of stuff, rather than having them as individual components. So I just had to go break them all out into their individuals, and you can see it's exactly the same as we've been doing over and over again in this video now, where I've got the loop with 4 knots, the loop with 4 knots, and then the length of cordage in between those 2, yeah? So exact same construct. The only difference is, because of the larger diameter with paracord, you have to measure 18 inches, then fold it in half and do your knots to the loop. Whereas with the tarred bankline, because it's smaller diameter, it allows you to get away with only having to do 12 inches of cordage, fold it over, and then do the knots up the line to the loop, right? So I'll stop and shift cameras now. And I'm going to have to kind of shift how I've got this set up a bit. I need tension on this orange line to attach these tarred bank lines as the next step. But once we get these tarred bank lines hooked on, we'll have absolutely complete finished units, and we'll be able to use them out in the field. I mean, I could easily use these out in the field even without the tarred bank line. You'll see as the example goes on in the video, if you kind of keep watching, you'll see as the example goes on, these are highly functional already exactly as they are. I just want to do a robust example and show you kind of taking it right up to the next level of the functionality you can have, right? So you can scale that, and that's the one really good part about these modular ropecraft systems. You can scale them up or scale them down once you understand the concepts of them to fit your own needs, you know? So like I say, one way or the other, I'll go and kind of shift and set things up a bit so I can show you the next step. Yep. Okay, so I've got things kind of set up for the next step. And what I've done is I took one of the 6 units that we had there and I've strung it up and just put tension on it. Okay, now I'm going to take one of my tarred bankline modular ropecraft units and I'm just going to take that, find the center point of that, and I'm going to just set that underneath the line. Hopefully the camera's getting this okay. I'll try to get to a spot where it's all right. But all I'm going to do now is take the other 2 ends and bring them through. And I'm going to want to do that 3 times. So there's twice. And I always want them rolling to the inside. So hopefully the camera's seeing that okay. Where it's rolling tighter and tighter to the inside. Now I'm just going to apply a bit of tension here and straighten it out. And what we're doing here is we're just making a prusik knot, it's called. And if you've watched previous videos of mine, you'll know that I use prusik loops or prusik knots all the time. And anywhere where it's not to the outside, so the inside strands want to roll to the outside to get to that loop. And when it should become tight, it should look like this, and I'll come in on this a bit. And now you're just going to have these 2 ends here that are sitting. And what we can do with those, now that that prusik's on, here, I'll come in close and I'll show you what the prusik should look like. And then I'll just show you kind of finishing this off where you can have it just set as a closed loop. But it's easy enough to open and close this. You'll see as we go to do examples out in the field. And I'm going to want to have 2 of these on each one of these orange lines, yeah? So let me shift camera angles and I'll show you this up really close, yeah? Yeah, it's about as realistically about as close as I can get it. And you can see all these loops should be laying flat to each other. And it should look like that, to give you an idea. So now the good part about using prusiks is they're free to slide along the line. I can move this wherever I want, yeah? I've got a bit of dirt on the line to make it, but it's easy enough. You just loosen off your prusik and you can slide. There's a bit of dirt right there, but you can slide it along the line without issue. Now, the good part about these is as soon as I apply tension one direction or the other, it locks that knot and stops it from sliding on that line. So I can pull from either side and I can pull as hard as I want. This isn't going to move. But as soon as the pressure's off, and you can see it kind of forms this tension where it locks everything. And as soon as the tension's off, I can go back to just sliding it on the line again. So it makes it really handy in that regard of being able to kind of shift these up and down the line and position them where you want to. And it becomes ideal for when you're wanting to connect to tarps and that kind of stuff. So like I say, I'll hook on one more here. I'll just slide this one off to the side a bit. I'll grab one more and do an up close of that again the second time. And all I'm doing really is I'm taking one of my modular ropecraft systems of the tarred bankline. I'm taking where the 2 knots are and just kind of bringing them together as such, so I can figure out where the halfway point is here. And all I'm doing now is turning around and saying, bring that loop over top. I'm just grabbing the 2 bands that are kind of part of the unit and just wrapping it around. I'm going around 3 times. So that's twice. And you can see, I'm trying to stay in camera without bumping the camera itself, but you can see it keeps rolling to the inside. And I'll just roll it the 3rd time to the inside as such. And then I just want to kind of apply tension now to that without having the lines cross up on themselves, if you will. So, and you'll see it wants to kind of do like that. Hopefully the camera's seeing that okay. Let me see. Let me shift this over a little bit. So you can see how it wants to kind of cross over right here. You just got to make sure that the lines are staying to the outside, and that way everything sits flat. And then it's just a part of making a nice clean prusik. So as the tension gets applied, it'll just kind of all sit tight to each other as such, yeah? And it'll have, you'll know you did it right when the band sits tight on the back. And on the front side, you'll see they're all laying flat to each other and they're all just side by each. So hopefully that gives you a good idea. And like I say, as soon as you apply tension, that's locked now. It's not going anywhere. As soon as I let the tension go, I can move that down the line. And it gives me adjustability of where I have these modular Ropecraft components now that are sitting. So I'll shift camera angles. I'll show you one last thing as kind of a finishing touch. But I've got to do this to all 6 of these units, the exact same thing. I'm going to prusik loop on 2 of the tarred bankline modular Ropecraft units to each one of the orange lines of the 5 that we had sitting down there below, yeah? So, like I say, just give me 2 seconds, I'll shift camera angles. So now when I want to connect on to things with this modular Ropecraft system, it's easy enough for me to turn around, say I fed this through a tarp or whatever. It's easy enough to kind of put it through the grommet hole of the tarp. I just bring the knot back up. Hold on, sorry. I'll try to keep that out of the way. I just kind of bring the knot back up and hook it in to one of its own little loop spaces there. And when I apply tension now, it'll pinch the 2 lines there and lock it so that I can connect with just a single one of these and have tension and just lock onto things. Now I can go that way and then it's quick release. I can just pull it back out. But I can also turn around and make this like a closed loop system. So if I take the one on one end, I take the loop and just kind of roll it onto itself and create a little pocket where it slides there. I can take the other unit now, the other arm of the unit, and just feed that through. And as soon as I get past the first knot, you know, you get that loop and then the first knot there. Once I get past that, I can just lock that and allow that to slide up in behind. And now I have a locked loop that's not able to open up freely. So I can connect to tarps if I'm really worried about wanting to hook onto things and having a permanent connection. I can easily feed through a grommet or a tie-off point on a tarp and connect it as such. And this becomes more of a permanent loop lock system. It's easy enough to turn around and get it off though, where I just break the back here. It loosens that back up. I slide this back out and I'm back to having the 2 bands now that I can use if I want to have everything quick release. So it's flexible in that regard. But like I say, I've got 6 of these orange lines now. I'm going to go hook on the double prusiks like we have here. I'm going to turn around and hook on the double prusiks to each one of all 6 of those. And then we'll have complete systems, yeah? All right, folks. So I've turned around and connected on all the drop lines, I call them, where they're the prusik knots tied onto the orange line, yeah, where we put 2 on each. Then this here is a single individual unit. I've done all the other 5 that exist here. And if you watch previous videos of mine, I do a lot of quick release bundles. So I've just bundled them all up so that they're already ready to go into my kit. And I just kept this one out so that you guys could see kind of a full individual unit that in its full capacity, yeah? So as you can see, we've got the short length that connects to the orange right here. It feeds off to the drop line prusik, which we just showed previously in the video. And then that line on the other side has another prusik where it puts the drop lines out. And then it just feeds off to one of these additional modular Ropecraft system units, yeah? So this to me is like a full length setup. You can use individual components and stuff. Now I'll probably end up breaking the video. I'll just pause for a second. Now this video I know is already getting long just given the nature of what we're doing. So what I'll probably do is make this a part 1, where this is the assembly and the building of these units. And then I'll do a second video, which is the using these out in the field to show you detail of exactly how to use these. But, you know, as a kind of prelude to that, if you will, I'll preface this by saying that, you know, just one of these individual components, even the short lengths, I can use to do tasks. Like I can hang a backpack up from a tree just using a single one of these dark green units. And I've shown that in the previous, the charred bankline, the simple modular ropecraft system videos, where if you are eager to kind of see how these things get used out in the field before I post this, the in the field examples, go back and watch that video, and you'll be able to see exactly what I'm talking about. But one way or the other, any one of these individual components that exist on here, I can easily rapidly break off and use, whether it be the tarred bankline component, whether it be the larger orange component. I can use that for like guy lines and that kind of stuff, or the individual component if I want to hang things from trees and that kind of stuff. It's really, really flexible. And that's one of the reasons why I kind of build these out as systems to show you the example. But when you're out in the field, all this stuff can easily become interchangeable. I could easily pop off these prusik drop lines and use them for some other task. And then when I want to pack everything back up in my bag, I just like having them together as clean kits, yeah? But to give you an idea of how big this animal is in its kind of complete as a single set, if I'm wrapping around, say, 2 small diameter trees that are 2-3 inches round, small, something about as round as my wrist, if you will. If I was going around trees that were only that size, I'm going to be able to, just with one of these units, I'm going to be able to reach about a 10-foot stretch between the trees. So to give you an idea of the versatility of this, I can easily reach to about 60 foot in distance between 2 trees. That's really, really large, generally speaking. In most examples I would ever show tend to be closer to 30 to 40 foot as a large stretch between 2 trees. But just having the 6 different kind of sets of these units really allows me to reach out that far. And if I'm daisy chaining these units together, and what I mean by that is, just as we connected the single short dark line to the orange here with this little quick connect like I showed earlier in the video, you can do that connecting each one of these components to each other because they're all just based off having loops on the ends. So it's easy enough to just hook the loops together as I showed earlier and stretch this out. And if you're using one of these units where it's just daisy chained to another, this can reach about 11 foot or so, give or take, but you're getting about 11 foot per individual unit. So you're talking, if you were just to connect them all together, daisy chaining them like we did here, and connect all 6 of them together, you're going to reach out to, 66 feet, almost 70 feet in length when it comes to, so it's a substantial length, that you could do at its fullest context. Generally speaking, though, most contexts, you're looking at 25, 30, 40 foot between trees where you're wanting to put up a tarp and that kind of stuff. You might use 1 or 2 of these to hang a tripod, to hang, to whip together a tripod, to hang a pot over the fire or that kind of stuff. But like I say, that's all stuff I'll show in the example. But there you have it though, folks. This is kind of the single individual component that exist, and then you just have multiples of these. So like I say, I'll break it off into 2 separate videos where I'll make the next video purely examples, because I know that some people like to see all the technical bits of building out these systems, and then other people just want to see the examples of using them out in the field, and if they think it's good enough, then they'll come back and kind of watch these videos. So I'll leave it to people's discretion of which part of the videos they want to watch and all that kind of stuff. But there you have it. This is the kind of advanced Paracord version of the Modular Ropecraft systems that I've done a whole series on Modular Ropecraft systems. Like I say, just ones that are purely the bankline, ones that are Kevlar based and other stuff. So if you're interested in kind of advancing out your ropecraft knowledge and being able to rapidly set up entire camps without having to tie any knots in a matter of minutes, you might want to go back and watch some of those previous videos. Then I'll show, when I go to do the example video of this, where you can interchangeably use these modular ropecraft systems together. In the previous, one of the previous videos I did the Kevlar, I did a raised bed that sat between 2 trees, and that was a combination of my tarred bankline modular ropecraft systems with the Kevlar ones that I have, and that was good enough where I could whip together a hammock, if you will, that tree bed. I don't know exactly what to call that yet, but where I can whip one of those together in a matter of minutes. And that's one of the beautiful things about using this stuff, is even though I'm using different types of cordage and different diameters and all that kind of stuff, the modular Ropecraft systems allow me to have this interoperability between my Ropecraft systems. So if you've already built out previous ones in the past and you're just wanting to kind of expand that out, you could easily look at incorporating the Paracord ones into your future kit, if you will, yeah? But like I say, I'll wrap this video up. So if you enjoy this type of content, you know, please like, share, and subscribe and all that kind of stuff. And I'll probably release the example video in about a week or two. That's what I'll aim for. It's been really busy on this side. And I normally just chain it along, but I know people have complained about my videos getting super long, or nobody wants to watch for an hour and 45 minutes and that kind of stuff, right? So like I say, I'll break it off into 2 separate videos. But if you enjoy this type of content, please like, share, and subscribe. And thanks for watching, yeah? Cheers.